Hello, welcome to the HR Strategy in the Hot Seat podcast. My name's Anwen Bottois, I'm your host, and I'm the founder of Purple Sky Consulting. I'm a leadership promotion specialist, and I also have a bit of a side hustle where I focus on development of HR leaders. So as the title of the podcast suggests, this is going to be all about HR strategy and how we can help HR professionals to consider the strategic elements of HR in more depth. Now let's get started with this episode. Hello, it's Anwen here, and I'm going to be trying something a little bit different over the next 2 episodes. So I'm going to be recording 2 solo episodes where it's just me having a natter with you. And this is something new for me, so I'd really love to hear what you think about these episodes. But they are also prompts for starting a conversation. That might be a conversation just with yourself. It might be a conversation with others. It might be a conversation with me or the wider community for this podcast. However this prompts your thinking or whatever opinions you might have about what I'm going to share in these couple of episodes, I'd really love to hear from you. So please do get in touch with me. You can do that privately by just dropping me an email at anwen@purpleskyconsulting.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy for you to drop me a message there. If not, why not leave a comment on the LinkedIn page for HR Strategy in the Hot Seat podcast? Each time I publish an episode, I put that into that LinkedIn group, so you can then jump in there and join the conversation about the topic that I'm sharing. The topic I'm going to be sharing over these next 2 episodes is kind of the source, the starting point, the origin story, you could say, for the podcast. It's going to be delving into HR strategy and what we mean by HR strategy. And I'm going to be giving you my perspective on that. That will be based on my 20-odd years experience in HR, but also the work that I've done to help HR colleagues develop their strategic thinking, their strategic solutions, and the approach that they take to strategy and support in the business. So I've got 2 elements of that. It's my experience, but also the work that I've been doing to help develop others. And my final role in-house was as Associate Director for People Strategy. So my outlook, I guess, on work and the HR activity that can be done within an organisation very much comes from that strategy side of things. So I'm hoping that I'm not too far off the mark from what you think. Or if I am, maybe that's not a bad thing. And maybe this can start a different thought process for yourself. But also, if you disagree with what I'm saying, please tell me. We're all allowed to have an opinion on things. I'm taking this from my perspective and how I've developed and the work that I've done in my career. And that doesn't mean I will be 100% right on this or 100% perfect on it, or that I've not missed something as part of this. And that's why I'm inviting you to be part of the conversation. If I just give a bit of an intro in terms of what this session's going to be about, and then also the second session, because they are going to be quite different. We're going to be looking at HR strategy from 2 different angles, and 2 different ways of thinking about HR strategy, or strategic HR might be another way of describing it. So why do I think this conversation matters and considering HR strategy more broadly is important? Well, if we're not operating as a function in this strategic space, and we're not operating in a way that is really part of the organisation and part of shaping the organisation's success, we will stay as a function in a process policy bucket. So we need to be in a place as a function where we are very much part of how the organisation is developing, growing, performing. And that's where strategic HR comes in. So what do I see as HR strategy? Well, ultimately, it's business strategy. HR strategy is often a term used within organisations to badge the people plan, the focus areas for people, linked to the business strategy. I mean, that's what it should be. If it isn't doing that, then it's not going to be useful. So, first of all, HR strategy is a badge, but ultimately, strategic HR is business strategy. So today we're going to focus on one of the elements of HR strategy that I think is important for us to pay attention to. And then in the next session, we're going to be looking at the other element of it. So element one that we're going to talk about today is execution of strategy and how HR plays a role into that. And then in the next session, we're going to be looking at how to operate strategically. How, as HR colleagues, leaders, functions, do we need to operate in a way where we truly are strategic and impacting strategically? So that's how I'm going to split the sessions. So what we're going to dive into now is a conversation about executing strategy and what I think contributes to all of that. So let's start talking about HR strategy execution. And there are a couple of elements of this that I think are really important. And from a HR leadership perspective, this is where we should be really focusing about where we're spending our time and the conversations that we are having. So first up, it's that development piece. It is about how do we help look for solutions and help shape the direction of the organization based on what needs to be achieved. Now, that could center around a North Star for the organization. We were talking about those types of things with Danny in the last episode, so I encourage you to go back and have a look at that. And that's development piece is so critical because what we're looking at here is making sure we're investing our time, energy, resources in the right place to help us move forward. So being actively involved in the development stage allows us to help shape the direction of travel. And this is where, as HR colleagues, we're really important around that table, around the discussions of developing the business strategy, to understand the opportunities through our people of where the business is trying to go, to understand the risks, and to understand what is going to be necessary to bring people along and to connect people with that business strategy and North Star in a way that we can really demonstrate our subject matter expertise around people. So developing what that looks like, I think, is one of the key factors of HR strategy execution. We've then got the translation part of that. So how do we go from this North Star and this future-facing element, and maybe we've got some key priorities and goals in there. What we can then be doing as HR colleagues is really looking at how are we going to translate that direction into our day-to-day activities. What does that mean for how we need to support the organization to perform, to develop, to consider feedback loops, opportunities in that space? What does this mean in terms of engagement? So how do we need to help people in that space? And what level of transformation or change is going to be required to deliver and execute on that business strategy through people? All of those conversations are critical. But if we're not paying attention to the change requirements, the development requirements, the engagement and communication that is required, how do we then know where we might have gaps in terms of our leadership capabilities to deliver on that? And how can we then input into a valuable conversation about how the business can be successful in implementing that strategy? From there, we move into that area of implementing solutions. So we've made some decisions around the business strategy. We've looked at it from a perspective of what does this mean and what are the implications for people. We might have specific solutions or projects or pieces of work, milestones, etc., however you might badge that in your organization. And it's being actively involved in what those solutions are going to be and how to implement those in a really effective way. How are we supporting our people through any transitions and changes or new focus areas, new approaches to communication? And that's where, from an HR strategy perspective, we're really shaping and influencing how it gets done. From there, we've hopefully done a really great job of executing the business strategy and looking at it effectively, shaping it effectively from a people perspective so that the business really can succeed, but that we're also enabling our people to thrive as a result of the approach that we've taken and the involvement early on in the development and execution of that strategy. We then need to be looking at, well, how do we evolve things from here? So are we taking time and are we encouraging conversations around that leadership table to review success, to take time to understand the learning points that might have come from the work that has been done in that HR and business strategy execution? What is it that we now need to iterate, take further? What is it that we've learned from that we know actually this doesn't serve our organization particularly well, or this didn't go particularly well? And what that's shown us is there's a gap within our organization. It could be a capacity gap. It could be a capability gap. It could be a leadership capability gap. It could be actually we've made the wrong decision as an organization for what we're going after there. And therefore, how does that then translate in terms of any performance, reward frameworks that might be in place and how that connects to that? What engagement, what communication is now required in terms of where the business strategy is and what this means for people within the organization? How do we keep them connected to the story? And how do we help them understand what's going to come next? So evolving that HR strategy, that business strategy, that's the role that we play in our organizations there. Making sure that we're taking people along with us, and that is people in all areas. So how do we keep our leadership team focused on what we'd committed to and the plans that we created and the communication that we set up to make sure people understood where we're going and how we're going to get there? How are we bringing in broader leadership teams and leaders and managers into those conversations so that they are handling that on a day-to-day basis? And how are we getting them to feed back into that evolution conversation of understanding where we need to go and how we're going to get there? So that's part of that evolution piece. Now, what we also want to be doing is celebrating the successes and also, like we've already talked about, thinking about the learning points from the work that's been done. It's also important not just to look at the learning points from the actions of the strategy, the kind of the outputs of the strategy, but how as a leadership team and more broadly, have you worked well together or not in executing that strategy? And that's where, as HR leaders, we can play a really important role of asking those questions in terms of like, have we chosen the right things here? What can we learn from that? What were the barriers? What got in our way? But also not just focusing on the learning points, giving time to learn from the successes as well. What went well? How did our people react really well? What is it we need to identify from that? Did it just happen by magic, or was it because we did all these brilliant interventions and approaches to communication engagement that really helped us? It might have gone really smoothly, and what we might not notice then is how important that was for next time, and it might be easier to drop that off. So taking really good care to review those things. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about HR strategy execution. We're talking about the development of that strategy, the translation of it, the solutions to implement, and how we are reviewing and evolving where that strategy is. HR strategy is business strategy. We just badge it with HR strategy as a lens, as a focus. And also, let's be honest, within our HR functions, it's really good for us to have our own operating plan. And this helps us to make decisions and it helps us to have focus as a function. So those are my thoughts on the executing of HR strategy. In the next session, we're going to be diving into what I mean by operating strategically in HR. We're going to be looking at the skills, the behaviors, the mindset, the approach that HR colleagues really need to be implementing, bringing to life, flexing, so that they truly are operating in a strategic way. And I've heard this in my career and will have heard, I'm sure everybody listening to this and those that have worked around you have always heard we need to be more strategic, or you need to be more strategic. We've got to take that sometimes. We've got to reflect and have a look at, have we operated in a way that's strategic? Look, this isn't a magic thing. This is about skills, behaviors, how we're showing up. So we can take action here. And sometimes it's because we've never done it before, and that's okay too. So next session, we are going to look at how to really operate in a strategic way. So before we wrap up, I'm just going to, if you don't mind, share a little bit with you about me. Because whenever I introduce my guests, I ask them to give a bit of a summary about who they are. And I realise I've not done that yet. So I'm going to just take a few moments to share a little bit about me with you. So my name's Anwen Bottois. My business is Purple Sky Consulting. I spent 20 odd years in HR before COVID came along. And after a bit of soul searching, my husband and I both turning 40, we decided that we needed a bit of a change in our life. And when the COVID curtain came up, we sold our house and we went travelling for 11 months and absolutely loved it. Really, really loved that element of it. Before we went travelling, I decided to leave my job. I was associate director at university. And I really loved the leadership element of it. Probably more than the HR stuff, to be perfectly honest. But what I wanted to do was use that experience, use my coaching qualifications and my skill set in coaching and leadership coaching, because I really love that element of things, to build my business. So my business focus is on leadership development. I'm particularly interested in supporting leaders as they transition into more senior roles and move into more strategic leadership roles. So that's kind of my sweet spot, my little niche that I really enjoy working with. But I also work more broadly, delivering leadership development programs, coaching, career coaching at all levels as well. I'm particularly interested in terms of how do we transform leadership development? How do we make sure we're seeing and reflecting the individual in what we're delivering within our organisations for development? So if you're interested in a conversation about that and want to input into how I'm developing some of those offerings, or it's something that you think you might be interested in for your organisation, please do get in touch. I'm based in Manchester. That's where I live, but I work a bit all over the place. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you whenever it's useful for you. So please do get in touch and I'd love to talk to you at some point soon. Right, so I will wrap us up there. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that you are enjoying this podcast so far. If you haven't listened to the other episodes with Tom Emery, Paula Brockwell and Danny Wareham, please go back and have a listen to them. If you're not following us already, why not give us a follow? If you've got an idea about topics or guests you'd like to hear from, then please also drop me a note on that too. Okay, right, I will see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining this episode of HR Strategy in the Hot Seats. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think about this episode. What did you think about the topic? If you have any thoughts on topics, themes, questions, guests you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please do let me know. Get in touch with me via LinkedIn or drop me an email at anwen@purpleskyconsulting.co.uk. Hope that you could join us on the next episode and make sure you share this with any of your network too. Thank you.